Hey, what's up, guys? It's your girl Whitney B. So, in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a closure wig using a sewing machine. So, we're just going to get right into it. So, I just showed you the T pins that I use. I purchased these from Amazon. They actually came with this dome head that I'm using. So, definitely when making your wig, you want to make sure you have plenty of T-pins. These things will definitely come in handy, as you will see. So, I'm just adjusting my wig cap. You want to try to stretch it as far as possible. And now I'm going to be placing my closure in the front so that I can sew it down. I know some people, they actually sew their closure using the sewing machine, but for myself and for my clients, I definitely like to hand sew my closure just because it allows the closure to be super flat. I just found that it's easier and it gives a better outcome when I actually hand sew it. If you ever notice, sometimes when you see a person with a wig on, it kind of looks bulky in the front, and it could sometimes be because the closure is not as flat as possible. So, like I said, definitely you want to make sure your closure is flat. And if you prefer using the machine, that's fine too. But like I said, it's my preference to actually hand sew. So I'm just braiding this hair because it's super long and I just wanted to move it out the way. And I'm just going to do a simple, easy braid and move that over to the side. Now I'm going to use my T-pins to place the closure, in the middle, as much as in the middle as I possibly can. And as you see how flat that closure is on that wig cap. This is how flat you want your closure to be before you start to sew. So when you are placing your closure, you can definitely use the lines on the wig cap that you see right here to help guide you and to help you to make sure that your closure is placed directly in the center of the wig cap. So now that I've gotten my closure placed exactly where I need it to be, I'm just going to begin sewing it down onto my cap. Now, this is just your regular sewing technique. So, I would highly suggest that if you don't know how to hand sew, that you first practice that and master that before you try to use a sewing machine. I think it would just make it much easier if you know how to hand sew first. So as you can see, when I'm sewing this closure, I'm keeping my stitches pretty close together. This is just to be sure that I don't tear any holes in the wig cap or the closure, and just to make sure that my closure is super secure onto this cap. All right, so now that we've gotten our closure all sewed on, I will begin to make my guidelines for my tracks. Now, before we even start, these guidelines will not be perfect. And honestly, I've been sewing wigs for so long, I don't even really need the guidelines. But if you are a beginner, you definitely want to make guidelines so that you know exactly where you are sewing your tracks when you're using your machine. If you want your lines to be super straight, you can also use like those plastic tape measures to help you with your guidelines. But I'll say, as long as you're able to see the lines and they are as straight as you possibly can get them, you should be fine. So I am just getting my machine all set up. I have already threaded my bobbin, and I am going to make sure that I thread my needle. If you do not know how to thread your machine, there are plenty of YouTube tutorials on how to thread your sewing machine. Your machine that you purchase should also come with instructions, so it's not hard at all. I will also leave a link down below on the video that I posted on how to set up your machine and the machine settings. You want to sew at a zigzag stitch. I usually keep my needle position in the middle, and my length is usually like a 4 or 5, and my tension is usually like in between 4 or 5. But like I said, I will leave the link to the video of the settings for your machine in the description box below. All right, so we have our machine ready, and let's just get into it. So you first will place your wig cap into the machine. Make sure your lever and your needle is lifted up, and then you will place your first track on top of your very bottom guideline. You will then lower your lever in the back and lower your needle. And what I always like to do is be sure that I know where my strings are and that they're sticking out, because sometimes I find that when I begin sewing, it can get caught up and then it creates like a knot, or my string breaks or something. So as you can see, I'm just sewing and using my grid lines to sew the track onto the cap. As I get closer to the end of my cap and my line, I do go ahead and cut it, and then I'll just continue to sew. For every single track that I sew, at the beginning and at the end of the track, I always reverse my stitch. That way I can make sure that it's secure. Okay, so we've gotten our first track sewed on. It is secure, and Yes, it looks good. So we'll move on to the next track, and I'm pretty much gonna do the exact same thing, the exact steps throughout this entire wig. Definitely gonna use my grid lines to help me and guide me so that I know that I'm sewing on each track straight, as well as it's in the correct place, and that I'm able to fit all four of these bundles onto this unit. And as I stated, you definitely want to make sure that at the beginning and at the end of each track that you are reversing your stitch. This will help to make sure that your tracks are secured on your wig cap. The last thing you want is for your tracks to be unraveling, or for you to have a client and their tracks are falling out. So definitely reverse all of your stitches to be sure that they are secured. And sometimes you may find that when sewing, maybe you missed a spot. Instead of taking the track completely off of the wig cap, in some cases you may be able to just reverse your needle and go back over the part that you missed.
Never falling, why you making problems? I've been silent, why you making problems? I'm a problem, being rich is not my fault. You decide, do you think the ship is side? I've been quiet, hard to miss me when I'm flying. Going out to Keiko, she can stay in my room, she can stay in my room, and it ain't mine. Leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come with me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. Come with me, leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come with me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. Speed posted, in Nicky Beach. Waves in my ear, smoking weed. Dripping through the sand in a Jeep. All because of what I did on beats, baby. Light sleep, baby. I ain't stopping. You just go get ready, we go out, baby. Long time looking for the concert. And 300 pounds, yeah. Come with me, leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come with me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. Come with me, leave all of your things, yeah. Leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come with me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. Come with me, leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come with me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. Speed posted, in Nicky Beach. Waves in my ear, smoking weed. Dripping through the sand in a Jeep. All because of what I did on beats, baby. Light sleep, baby. I ain't stopping. You just go get ready, we go out, baby. Long time looking for the concert. And 300 pounds, yeah. Come with me, leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come with me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. full speed, se vuole per arriver. Comme me, viva la ninja. Que stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Comme me, fly you out the crib. Viva la ninja. Que stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Comme me, fly you out the crib. Full speed, se vuole per arriver. Comme me, viva la ninja. Que stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Comme me, fly you out the crib. Full speed, se vuole per arriver. Speed post, baby, in Nikki Beach. Waves in my ass, smoking weed. Living through the sand in a Jeep. All because of what I did on beats, baby. Life sweet, baby. I ain't stop, baby. You just go get ready, we go out, baby. Long time looking for the process. Andre had to bounce it. Don't me, viva la ninja. Get stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Homie, fly you out the crib. Full speed, se vuole per arriver. Homie, viva la ninja. Get stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Homie, fly you out the crib. Full speed, je suis ton génie. Rolls Royce, baby, and getting bills. Bags full of $100 bills. Driving past your wife and she get chills. All because of how I get the real. Light sleep, baby, on the G-Way. I'll get you anything you need, baby. Worth it, everything you see, baby. Ooh, yeah, baby. Ooh, Tony, viva la ninja. Get stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Homie, fly you out the crib. Full speed, se vuole per arriver. Homie, viva la ninja. Get stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Homie, fly you out the crib. Full speed, se vuole per arriver. Never falling, why you making problems? I've been silent, why you making problems? I'm a problem, being rich is now.
So as you see, we are getting close to being finished with this wig, and you will notice as you get closer to the top and you have most of your bundles in, it may become harder just to sew and handle the wig just because it's so much hair in the way, especially if you are sewing longer bundles and if you are making a thicker wig with multiple bundles like 4 or 5. It does become harder, but just make sure you always have control of your wig. If you need to go slow, take your time, and just be sure that you are following your grid lines to help you make sure that your tracks are in the correct place.
Full speed, se vuole per arriver. Speed post, baby, in Nikki Beach. Waves in my ass, smoking weed. Living through the sand in a Jeep. All because of what I did on beats, baby. Light sweet, baby. I ain't stop, baby. You just go get ready, we go out, baby. Long time looking for the process. Andre had to bounce it. Tony, viva la ninja. Get stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Homie, fly you out the crib. Full speed, se vuole per arriver. Homie, viva la ninja. Get stop it, Gucci, stop it, Louis V. Homie, fly you out the crib. Full speed, je suis ton génie. Rolls Royce, baby, and getting bills. Bags full of $100 Gucci, stop at Louis V. Yeah. On me, fly you out the crib. Full speed, so fully Berlin. On me, leave all of your things, yeah. You stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V. Yeah. On me, fly you out the crib. Full speed, so fully Berlin. Never falling, why you making problems? I've been silent, why you making problems? I'm a problem, being rich is not my fault. You decide, who you think the ship reside with? I've been quiet, hard to miss me when I'm flying. Going out to Caicos, she can stay in my room, she can stay in my room, and it ain't mine. I was tryna play it right. Leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Call me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly, yeah. Call me, leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Call me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly, yeah. Speed post, baby, in Nikki Beach. Waves in my ear, smoking weed. Dripping through the sand in a Jeep. All because of what I did on beats, baby. Life sweet, baby. I ain't stop, baby. You just go get ready, we go out, baby. Long time looking for the bounce, yeah. And 300 pounds, yeah. Come on me, leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me, fly you out the crib. Full speed, so fully Berlin. Come on me, leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me, fly you out the crib. Full speed, sweet on Janine. Rolls Royce, baby, and getting deals. Bags full of $100 bills. Driving past your wife and she get chills. All because of how I get the real. Light sleeper on the speedway. I'll get you anything you need, baby. Worth it, everything you see, baby. Ooh, yeah, baby. Ooh, come on me. Leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me. Fly you out the crib. Full speed, so fully Berlin. Come on me. Leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me. Fly you out the crib. Full speed, so fully Berlin. Never falling, why you making problems? I've been silent, why you making problems? I'm a problem, being rich is not my fault. You decide who you think the ship reside with.
So y'all, we are just about done with this wig. As you see, I'm struggling a little bit cuz this hair is so long and thick, but I'm going to get it done. I've definitely dealt with much longer, thicker hair. I will say that I was a little worried because initially I had doubled my tracks in the back because I wanted a more fuller, thicker look. And then once I got to the top, I was like, I hope I have enough hair. But everything worked out, and I ended up having just enough hair, and I was able to fit all 4.5 bundles onto this wig. So it actually turned out really great and it worked out.
In Nikki Beach, waves in my ear, smoking weed. Dripping through the sand in a Jeep. All because of what I did on beats, baby. Life sweet, baby. stop, baby. You just go get ready, we go out, baby. Long time looking for the concept. And Dre had to bounce it. Come on me, leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me, fly you out the breeze. Full speed, so fully believe it. Come on me, leave all of your things, yeah. Get stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me, fly you out the breeze. Full speed, sweet on Janine. Close nights, baby, and getting bitters. Bags full of $100 bills. Driving past your wife and she get chills. All because of
So we are finally done with this wig. And what you want to do when you get done is you first want to flip your wig inside out and just look it over and cut out any extra strings, any strings that are hanging. You definitely want to be sure that you cut all of those. And then you also can begin to start cutting the piece under your closure. I will say that you definitely want to be very, very careful when cutting out this piece. I've had times before where I've accidentally cut the closure and I've had to sew a new closure onto a wig. So definitely be careful with doing this. And if as long as you take your time, you should be good.
why you making problems? I'm a problem. Being rich is not my fault. You decide who you think the shit reside with. I've been quiet. Hard to miss me when I'm flying. Going out to Keiko. She can stay in my room. She can stay in my room. And it ain't mine. Leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. Come on me, leave all of your things, yeah. You can stop at Gucci, stop at Louis V, yeah. Come on me, fly you out to Greece. Full speed, so fully belly. Speedboat.
So the wig is now all completed, and as y'all can see, this wig is bomb. It is so thick and full, and like, wait till I style it. It's gonna look so good. I have to color it and style it for one of my customers, but she's definitely going to be pleased with this. So I really hope this video was helpful. I'll definitely be posting plenty more wig making tutorials for all of my wig makers. So definitely, if you have not yet subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.